Okay guys, so we've got our top made, we've got our quilt stacked, best stacked. I mean, we have got our back, we've got our batting in the middle, we've got our quilt top, and we've pinned it all together. Okay, I've already started some of the quilting so I could show you some things. Now when you're quilting in squares, it's personal preference on how you do it. What I decided to do on this one is in the prints, as you can see, I have quilted in one direction, and then in the solids I've gone opposite. Now with checkerboard patterns in the past or scrap quilts in the past that are squares, I have done X's and O's. Maybe X the solid and then put a O in the print. You can do that, or you can just quilt squares inside squares on all of them. Truly is just a personal preference. Just imagine, if you will, if you had used a solid blue on the back of it. Whatever you're quilting here is going to have the same pattern quilted on the back. Now in the case of this one, where I have this little print on the back, let me get it turned over here. Okay. It's really not going to show up as much on the back. It's beautiful when it's a solid color to see those patterns come through the back of it. But on this one, it's not such a big deal. So, you know, I decided to go across and up and down. But if I wanted a pretty pattern to show up, if it had been a solid color, I would have done the X's and O's just because it stands for hugs and kisses. And that way when you flip the quilt over, you even have that pretty pattern showing up on the back. In this case, not a big deal. So I just went ahead with this. You want to start in the center of your quilt, okay? Now it doesn't have to be the exact center, but you know, you want to be kind of in toward the midpoint of your quilt. That way, when you're quilting, you are quilting outward. If you didn't pin it really tight, for example, once you're starting to actually quilt this down, it's pushing those layers together, so you're going to be constantly moving any loose areas are going to start being pushed outward, instead of quilting yourself into a position to where you're going to have a lot of material bunched up because there's nowhere to disperse that fabric. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say you were quilting in, stopped here, and then you were quilting from the left over toward that point. Whatever you're quilting toward is going to be pushing that fabric. So that's why you want to quilt toward the outside, so the fabric has somewhere to relax and go to, instead of being pushed into a bunch toward the center, for example. So you just want to start in the center, work your way out as you're quilting, and you may have to adjust your safety pins as you go. I've noticed having to do that before. You know, like for an example, after I quilted these across, if there was any give to the fabric at all, I might have to take this safety pin out and re-flatten it again and then repin it. Okay, so just a tip there. Always start in the center of the quilt and work your way out. The next thing I'll show you is the stitching. Now, I don't want you to get too caught up in, especially with your first quilt, are my lines straight? Are some of my stitches bigger than the other stitches? You know, things like that. I know from learning myself, that's where I would let myself get bogged down. So first of all, you're going to be the one who notices your stitching more than anyone else. Okay? They're going to be looking at it as a whole. But don't get stressed. Just keep on, keep it on, and you will get better at that. There's 3 different ways that I have seen people quilt. They either go in with the needle and thread and they quilt across, you know, comfortably across, or start at the bottom. They would start like right here, put the needle in and quilt away from themselves. Or they go to the top of the block, put the needle in and pull toward themselves. I hate trying to quilt toward myself. I will flip this thing around. I don't mind going across. I actually prefer to quilt away from myself. I feel like I have a little more control of my needle. But you can do any of the three. Okay, and on something this small, you could even quilt it on your machine if you wanted. But I just like the hand quilted look myself. Okay, so what we're going to do, as you can see here, as I've been quilting my way out toward the edge, I'm right here now. I have these two still yet to do, and then on down. So I'm going to take the safety pin out now. Now you can either come up from the bottom, or the way Mom and I always did it was where, if this is the square I'm going to be working in, I'm going to come in either from the side or the top, wherever I need to be. Since I'm going to be quilting down, I'm going to come in from this one at the top. Okay, and I like having my fingers underneath with no thimble so I can feel the needle. Like, I want to make sure this needle's not going all the way through and that it's staying sandwiched in the middle underneath the batting. Okay, so I'm going to push it in and come up in the square where I need to start my stitch. So it'll be right about there. Okay, and just pull it through, and you're going to notice the little knot is right there on the outside. So what I want to do is very carefully pull that through. So I always hold the block over here and then give it a tug. And did you just notice it there? It just popped right through. Alright, now that knot is going to catch inside the batting because I made sure I went under the batting. And it's not just going to keep pulling through. Okay? So now I'm going to show you how to quilt side to side first. Okay, so we're going to just go back down in that seam and continue across, just rocking that needle. Before I pull through, I always take a look at it, make sure it looks like it's staying straight, and then just give it a pull. You can usually load up about 4 or 5 stitches on the needle before you pull through, or if you feel more comfortable doing 1 stitch at a time till you get into it a little bit more, that's okay too. Okay, so once you get to the end, I'm going to turn the quilt around. Now I'm going to want to go down into it again, staying right under the batting as I run the needle across. I want to pull it up right there. And just shift it to where I can go parallel right across. Now, if you feel more comfortable using a thimble, guys, go right ahead. Because without a thimble, you are going to pick your fingers. I mean, believe me, mine peel like crazy all the time. But I have to be able to feel it. Some people, they just like to you know, keep an eye on it. Flip the material over and make sure all 3 layers got caught. I'm not that comfortable. I have to be able to have my hand under there and feel that needle when it goes down to know that it penetrated all 3 layers. But I mean, you know, thimbles are handy. That's what they're made for, is to protect the fingers. So, by all means. Now, I'm going to show you how I like my preferred method of quilting away from my body. And we're going to go back down. And we're going to come up right over here. Again, I've got my finger under there, so I know it's staying right underneath the batting and in the middle. It didn't come through the other side. And we're going to push the needle down and then rock it. Push it down again and just rock it. And then take a look. It looks pretty straight, so push it through. Okay. And then continue. Right down in front of where I just came up. And then just rock it. It's really hard to see a needle and thread on this camera, I know. But fortunately it's just straight seams. There's really not much to teach you other than just make your stitches. You know, try to be consistent. And just push forward. And then when you get up here to the end, just like before, we're going to go ahead and turn it. You're going to want to go down in between the layers. You can see it there. Push it across to where you want your next row of stitches. We're just going to go parallel to this one, right back down. Okay. Now this one, I tried to get off just a little so I could show you. Can you tell how it's slightly at an angle instead of straight? So all you have to do, that's why I always look before I push it through, is I just pull it out and go right back in and do it again. Much better. Push through and pull. Go back down in front where we just pulled through. And again, just kind of rock it. As soon as you see it pop up through, you're ready to go ahead and start pushing it down again. That way they stay kind of uniform. Now the thing about lap quilting that I like is I can turn the TV on and watch or listen to the TV while I'm doing this, and it's very relaxing. I don't have the TV on now, but since I'm recording I muted it. Alright, so as you can see, we just did 2 squares. I'm going to continue quilting, and then I'm not going to make you watch me do a bunch of squares. The stitching is the same, whether you're going across or you're quilting away from yourself. Alright guys, so what I wanted to show you is how to tie off. So you're going to go down in between the layers into the next square over, as far into it as you want to go. And then when you see it pop up right here, you're just going to pull it through. Now, you're going to hold it bunched up like that, okay? And you're going to go ahead and tie your knot. I tied about 3 times. Okay? And then grab your scissors. Trim the thread. Now, you want to come up here where you can see the knot on the outside of the material. And you want to hold the last seam that you took and then just pull gently until you feel that knot pop through. Okay, so there you can see the tail of the thread, and it's going to hide itself inside there just like when we first started. Okay, so now you're tied off and ready to grab another needle and take off again. Okay guys, so my quilting is done. So now we're going to be working on the binding. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can do binding. You can take your extra fabric and cut long strips, and if you choose to do that, what you would do is lay your right sides together and sew the entire strip down so that you could fold it over to the back and pin it. Or you can just simply take the top of your quilt, which is what I've done. I tend to make my top just a little bit wider so that I always have enough I can fold over and bind that way. Just saves the step. But you can do either one. Maybe you want to do just a solid white border that would be on both sides. Then you would just take white strips, sew them right down the edge, and fold them around and pin them. You can also, once we're to this point, you can put this on a sewing machine if you want and just sew a tiny little stitch, a straight stitch all the way down, so as close to the edge as you can. Or what we're going to do, since we have hand quilted it, we're going to go ahead and stitch this closed by hand. Alright, so I did just want to show you though how cute it's turning out. You can see the quilting on the back. It's a cute baby print. And then it's more of a pretty quilt on the front. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to take you over to the couch where I can grab my needle and thread, and we're going to start stitching it closed. Just closing up the binding here. And what we're doing, I've gone through and pinned it. And you're going to go underneath the 2. Now I fold my binding so the raw edge is tucked way back in there, okay? So we're going to go back in underneath, make sure we're picking up the backing here, and then we also want to come up and grab that top there of the binding, but underneath the fold so that it's hidden. Okay, and then you're just going to pull that through, and it just tucks it down. Okay, so again, you go under, pick up the top layer as well, and you can go down. You can get a 2 or 3 on there if you want, and then just when you push it on there, you can tell that it's caught all the layers. You can look on the back and tell that it's not coming through. Oops, sorry. You can tell it's not coming through. So just pull that through, and you'll just do that all the way around the quilt. This does take some patience and time to do it this way. by all means, guys, you don't have to. You can put this right on the sewing machine and just sew very quickly a straight line. Just try to hug the edge of that as close as you can. Okay, and it'll look just fine. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this, and then we're going to close up the corners. Okay, so I will be right back when we're ready to do the corners. Okay guys, so what I did was tie it off just so I can manipulate this enough for you guys to see what we're doing. Okay, now there's two ways that you can do the corner. You can just do, you know, straight across, tuck it under, and then bring your next one straight across as well, and just tack that down into a square. Or you can cut off the excess tip there, and you can fold this down into the corner. I have to double fold. Okay, so bring that down. Do something more like this. You can also try to get a crisp point on that. Like this, which is the one that I will probably go with. Okay, and then just like the same way that you close this up, you're just going to go right up through here. You want to close it in everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close all four corners up, and then we'll be back. Okay guys, so we've got all the binding done, the quilting's all complete. Now what you want to do is just scan your quilt, thread trim it if there's any odd threads hanging out. And then what I like to do is toss this into the washer and give it a good wash, and if there's any lint from the batting, go ahead and clean it up. So let's go ahead and get this in the wash, and then I'll be right back. Okay guys, so our quilt is done, and we've got it washed and dried, and this is going to make a nice gift for someone. And I hope you guys learned how to do the basic quilt, and once you feel comfortable, you'll be able to jump in there and do all kinds of patterns. But this one's going to at least get you started and get you comfortable with how to quilt. So I hope you guys have a great week this week. Hey guys, this is totally optional, but I just wanted to show you something you could do if you wanted, if this was a gift that you were making and you just wanted to do a little something extra. You could take your extra material. Like when I cut my strips, I had this small piece left over. I just sewed it with a solid back on it and turned it and ironed it. This looks really cute if you want to, you know, fold your quilt nice and then wrap this around it. You could either pin it back here, or you could put Velcro on it, or you could tie it and just leave the knot hanging down in the front. You know, something like that. Just wanted to show you though, in case you had some scraps left over, some things you could do. One other thing that I did once was for a little girl, and I knew she liked her Barbie dolls, so I sewed all the little scraps together and just made a little Barbie quilt to match her quilt. So that's something else you can think about.